Did you know that the CIA tried to control us all by putting LSD in our water supply? Or that they even went as far as hypnosis? Well, get ready, because we are about to tell you everything there is to know about this and more. But before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any new stories. That being said, let's begin. How did it all start? When someone says CIA, what do you think of? A powerful organization that controls governments and events all around the world. But what if we told you that their reach extended further than that? What if we told you that they even tried to control people's minds? It sounds crazy, but it's true. And it all started with LSD. In the 1950s, the CIA began experimenting with LSD as a potential mind control weapon. They believed that by controlling the minds of their enemies, they could manipulate them into doing whatever they wanted. But what they didn't realize was that LSD is a powerful drug that can have unpredictable effects. In fact, one CIA agent was driven insane after taking just a small dose. As the CIA continued to experiment with LSD, they began to realize that it wasn't the right choice for mind control. However, they didn't give up. And that brings us to hypnosis. Hypnosis is a form of mental suggestion that has been used for centuries to control people's minds. And the CIA believed that it could be a powerful tool for espionage and counterintelligence. However, there was one problem. Hypnosis only works on certain people. Not everyone is susceptible to it. So, the CIA began experimenting with ways to make people more susceptible to hypnosis. And that's when they discovered something amazing. They found that by using a combination of LSD and hypnosis, they could control the minds of almost anyone. The CIA began developing a plan to use this technique on a large scale. They would put LSD in the water supply of their enemy cities, then use hypnosis to control them. But there was one problem. Putting LSD in the water supply was risky. The drug could have negative effects, and the CIA didn't want to risk any backlash. However, they were willing to take the risk because they believed that the potential payoff was too great to pass up. The CIA began their operation in the early 1960s. They set up a laboratory in a remote location where they could experiment with LSD and hypnosis. They also recruited a team of spies who would be responsible for carrying out their plan. The CIA spies would sneak into their target cities and put the LSD in the water supply. Then they would use hypnosis to control the citizens of those cities. The CIA believed that they were being very clever. They thought that no one would ever know what they were doing. But they were wrong. In the 1970s, a whistleblower came forward with information about the CIA's SLD experiments. This caused a public outcry, and the CIA was forced to end their mind control program. But the CIA was not the only government agency experimenting with LSD. The US Army was also interested in using the drug as a weapon. They believed that LSD could be used to create super soldiers who were immune to fear and pain. However, the Army's experiments were short-lived. The negative effects of LSD soon became apparent, and the project was abandoned. The CIA was not the only government agency interested in mind control. The Soviet Union also had a secret mind control program. The Soviets believed that by controlling people's minds, they could turn them into sleeper agents. These sleeper agents would live among the population of Western countries and wait for the signal from the Soviet Union. When that signal was given, these sleeper agents would rise up and take control of these countries. The Soviets used a variety of techniques to control people's minds, including hypnosis, drugs, and brainwashing. However, their efforts were never successful. The Western governments were always one step ahead of them, and the Soviet mind control program was eventually abandoned. The CIA's plan to put LSD in our water supply and control us all might sound like the plot of a movie, but it was actually a real plan that was developed by the CIA during the Cold War. This plan, which was codenamed Operation MKUltra was designed to use LSD and other forms of mind control to gain the upper hand against the Soviet Union. The CIA believed that by controlling the minds of their enemies, they could manipulate them into doing whatever they wanted. This could mean turning enemy soldiers into sleeper agents, or making enemy leaders appear to be insane. The possibilities were endless. The CIA began their experiments with LSD. In the early 1950s, they recruited volunteers from various backgrounds and dosed them with LSD to see what would happen. The results were often unpredictable and sometimes terrifying. Some of the volunteers became psychotic and others attempted suicide. But the CIA was undeterred. They believed that the potential benefits of LSD were too great to ignore. By the mid-1950s, the CIA was convinced that LSD was a powerful mind control tool. They began developing a plan to use LSD to control the minds of their enemies. The plan was simple. In theory, the CIA would put LSD in the food or water supply of a city, then use hypnosis to control the citizens of that city. However, the plan was fraught with problems. First of all, putting LSD in the food or water supply was risky. The drug could have negative side effects, and the CIA didn't want to risk any backlash. Secondly, hypnosis only works on certain people. Not everyone is susceptible to it. This meant that the CIA needed a way to make people more susceptible to hypnosis. The CIA began experimenting with ways to make people more susceptible to hypnosis. And that's when they discovered something amazing. They found that by using a combination of LSD and hypnosis, they could control the minds of almost anyone. The CIA began developing a new plan. They would put LSD in the water supply of their enemy cities, then use hypnosis to control the citizens of those cities. But the problem with this plan was that the CIA needed to make sure that the LSD didn't have any negative side effects. If the citizens of the city became psychotic or violent, it could cause a panic. The CIA didn't want to risk it, so they began testing the plan on a small scale. They dosed a few unsuspecting citizens with LSD and monitored them closely. When the tests were successful, the CIA began to develop a more comprehensive plan. They would send teams of spies into the cities of their enemies, who would put the LSD in the water supply. Then they would use hypnosis to control the citizens of those cities. The plan was risky, but the CIA believed that the potential payoff was worth it. If they could control the minds of the citizens of a city, they could control that city. They could manipulate the citizens into doing whatever they wanted. They could turn enemy soldiers into sleeper agents, or make enemy leaders appear to be insane. The possibilities were endless, but the plan was never carried out. In the 1970s, a whistleblower came forward with information about the CIA's LSD experiments. This caused a public outcry, and the CIA was forced to abandon their mind control program. While the CIA's plan to put LSD in our water supply was never carried out, the fact that it was even considered is disturbing. It shows that the CIA was willing to do whatever it took to gain the upper hand against the Soviet Union. It also shows how little regard the CIA had for the safety of the American people. Now let's talk about some of the other ways the CIA tried to manipulate our minds. One of the most common ways the CIA tried to manipulate people's minds was through subliminal messaging. Subliminal messages are a form of advertising that occurs below the threshold of conscious awareness. In other words, it's a message that you see or hear but are not consciously aware of. For example, if you were watching a movie and a scene flashed on the screen for a split second that you couldn't consciously perceive, that would be a subliminal message. The CIA believed that by using subliminal messages, they could influence people's behavior without them being aware of it. For example, the CIA could use subliminal messages to make people more susceptible to hypnosis. They could also use subliminal messages to plant ideas in people's minds. For example, the CIA could use subliminal messages to make people believe that the Soviet Union was planning to attack the United States. This could cause panic and chaos, and the CIA could use this to their advantage. Another way the CIA tried to manipulate people's minds was through the use of propaganda. Propaganda is a form of communication that is used to influence people's attitudes and behaviors towards a particular cause or position. The CIA believed that by using propaganda, they could shape people's opinions of events and issues. For example, the CIA could use propaganda to make the Soviet Union look like a tyrannical government that was oppressing its citizens. This could cause people in the United States to feel more strongly against the Soviet Union and support the CIA's efforts to contain communism. The CIA also used propaganda to shape people's opinions of the CIA itself. The CIA was a highly secretive organization, and they wanted to keep it that way. They believed that if people knew too much about the CIA, they would lose support of the American people. So the CIA used propaganda to create a false image of themselves. They wanted people to think that the CIA was a shadowy organization that was only involved in covert operations. In reality, the CIA was involved in a wide range of activities, from gathering intelligence to conducting assassinations. You can probably see now why the CIA kept most of their activities secret. The CIA's attempts to control people's minds were not limited to the United States. They also targeted people in other countries. One of the most famous examples of this is the CIA's attempt to control the mind of Fidel Castro. Castro was the leader of Cuba and a staunch ally of the Soviet Union. The CIA believed that if they could control Castro's mind, they could turn him against the Soviet Union. The CIA tried a number of different methods to control Castro's mind, but none of them worked. In the end, the CIA decided to simply assassinate Castro. However, the CIA's attempts to assassinate Castro were unsuccessful. Castro survived several attempts on his life, and he remained a thorn in the side of the CIA and the United States government for decades. As you can see, the CIA's attempts to control people's minds were widespread and varied. They used every method imaginable, from LSD to hypnosis to subliminal messaging, but in the end, their efforts were largely unsuccessful. People's minds are incredibly complex, and the CIA simply couldn't control them the way they wanted to. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Thanks for watching.